There is a moment you won't see it coming. Nobody rings a bell. There's no ceremony, no fireworks, no one clapping for you. It happens in an ordinary Tuesday, maybe while you're washing a dish, or sitting in traffic, or lying awake at 3 in the morning for reasons you can no longer remember, and something in you simply stops, stops apologizing for existing, stops shrinking to make other people comfortable, stops absorbing the storm in someone else's chest and calling it love. And in that moment, quiet, undramatic, almost invisible, an empath dies, not the person, the performance, and something else is born in its place, something calmer, something colder to the people who used to feed on your warmth, something that walks into a room and no longer asks for permission to take up space. That is what I want to talk to you about tonight. Not healing as the world sells it to you, not the candles, not the affirmations taped to your mirror, not the just protect your energy bumper sticker wisdom. I want to talk about what actually happens on the other side of it, because nobody prepares you for this part. Nobody tells you that healing doesn't make you softer, it makes you unreadable. And that terrifies the very people who once loved how easy you were to read. I need you to sit with something for a second, because it's the whole engine of everything I'm about to say. For most of your life, if you are the kind of person this speech is for, you have been fluent in a language nobody taught you on purpose. You walked into a room and knew, before a single word was spoken, whether the air was safe. You could feel the tension behind someone's smile. You could sense the sadness hiding underneath a joke. You absorbed moods like a sponge absorbs water, instantly, involuntarily, completely. And for a long time, you called this a gift. You were praised for it. You're so sensitive. You're so intuitive. You just get people. And you wore that like a badge because it felt like proof that you mattered, that you had a role, that you were needed. But here is the part nobody said out loud. That gift, unmanaged, unowned, unclaimed, is not a gift. It is an open wound with no skin over it. It is a house with every door unlocked. And for years, maybe decades, people walked in and out of you as they pleased. They dumped their grief on your floor and left. They handed you their anger and called it just venting. They took your energy the way you take air, without even noticing they were taking anything at all. And you let them, not because you were weak, because you believed somewhere underneath all of it that your worth was measured by how much you could carry for other people. That is the empath before healing, a beautiful, exhausted, invisible thing, running on empty and calling it purpose. But healing, real healing, not the performative kind, does something nobody warns you about. It doesn't make you carry more gracefully, it makes you put the weight down. And when you put the weight down in front of people who built their whole relationship with you on the assumption that you'd always pick it back up, they don't celebrate you, they panic. So let's talk about who you actually become, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. And I mean that as a compliment. The first thing a healed empath quietly turns into is someone who stops explaining themselves. Think about that for a second. Think about how much of your life has been spent explaining why you're tired, explaining why you said no, explaining why you need space, why you didn't answer the phone, why you're not in the mood to hold everyone's feelings today on top of your own. You have narrated your boundaries like you were on trial for having them, and healing doesn't give you a better explanation. It removes the need for one. You start to understand, not as an idea, but as a bone-deep certainty, that you do not owe anyone a defense for protecting your own peace. You say no, and the sentence ends there. No paragraph after it, no apology folded into the punctuation, no little smile to soften the blow. And I promise you, the people around you will feel that shift before they can name it. They will sense that the explanations have stopped coming, and it will unsettle them because your explanations used to be their leverage. As long as you were justifying yourself, they had something to argue with. They had a way in, but a person who simply states a boundary and does not defend it, that person cannot be argued with. That's not coldness. Write this down if you need to. That is sovereignty. The second thing you quietly become is someone who feels everything and reacts to almost nothing. This one confuses people the most because they assume healing means feeling less. It doesn't. If anything, you feel more, not less, because you are no longer spending half your energy defending yourself from your own emotions. You are no longer afraid of what you feel. You let it move through you completely. But here's the difference. The unhealed empath feels a wave and gets swept into the ocean. The healed empath feels the exact same wave and simply stands on the shore and watches it happen, fully present, fully aware, fully alive to the feeling, but no longer drowning in it. You will walk into a conversation that used to detonate you. The same tone of voice, the same manipulation, the same guilt trip dressed up as concern. And something in you will simply not take the bait anymore. Not because you don't care, because you finally understand that someone else's chaos is not an emergency you are required to respond to. And the people who are used to your reactions, who built entire strategies around provoking you, testing you, watching your face for the flinch that told them they still had control, they will escalate. They will push harder, say crueler things, dig for the old buttons, and find that the wiring has changed. That absence of reaction, that stillness where there used to be a scramble, it will unsettle them more than any argument ever could. Because arguments they know how to win. Silence, grounded and unbothered, they do not. The third thing you quietly become is someone who stops mistaking intensity for intimacy. This is a big one. Sit with this one. For most of your life, chaos might have felt like closeness. The late night crying, the on again, off again, the person who breaks you down and then holds you while you cry about it and calls that love that felt like depth, didn't it? It felt like proof that something real was happening because calm relationships, stable people, steady love, It can feel boring by comparison. It can feel like nothing is happening at all. But a healed person learns the truth that almost nobody tells you in time. Peace is not the absence of connection. Peace is what real connection actually feels like. You start to recognize the difference between a person who makes your nervous system feel like a fire alarm and a person who makes your nervous system feel like a held breath finally being let out. And once you know that difference in your body, not in your head, in your body, you cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to mistaking anxiety for chemistry. This is precisely why healed people are often accused, quietly or loudly, of changing, of not being fun anymore, of being distant. What's actually happening is that you have stopped being available for chaos. You have stopped confusing a racing heart with a full one. And the people who thrived in your old confusion, who needed you to mistake their storm for love, will feel the loss of that confusion as a kind of rejection. It is not rejection, it is discernment. And discernment, to a person who benefited from your lack of it, will always look like betrayal. Here is the fourth thing, and this one is going to sting a little, because it stung me. A healed empath stops trying to save people who never ask to be saved. You know this pattern. You have lived this pattern. You meet someone broken, someone struggling, someone in pain, and something in you lights up, not because you're drawn to their pain, but because you believe, somewhere deep and unspoken, that if you can fix them, you will finally have proven you are worth keeping. You have poured yourself into people who were never going to change. You have stayed in situations long after every reasonable signal told you to leave, because leaving felt like giving up on someone, and giving up on someone felt unbearable, because somewhere in your history, someone gave up on you first, and you swore you'd never do that to another human being. But healing teaches you something brutal and freeing at the same time. You cannot love someone into their own healing. You cannot think your way into fixing a person who has not decided to fix themselves. And the moment you finally accept that, not resentfully, not bitterly, but with a kind of exhausted clarity, you stop offering yourself as a rescue plan for every drowning person who crosses your path. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing care with responsibility for outcomes you were never in control of in the first place. And the people who relied on your rescuing, who built entire identities around being the project you were always working on, will not thank you for this. They will call you selfish. They will say you've changed, that you used to be more understanding, more patient, more available. What they mean underneath all of it is that you used to be more usable. Let them think what they need to think. You are not here to be a lifeboat for people who refuse to swim. The fifth thing, and I want you to really hear this one, is that a healed empath stops performing goodness and simply becomes good quietly without an audience. Think about how much of your kindness used to be visible. Think about how often you were kind in ways that could be seen, praised, remembered, not because you're a bad person, because somewhere along the way you learned that being good was how you earned your place at the table. Kindness became currency, and currency needs witnesses. Healing strips that away. You start doing the right thing even when nobody will ever know you did it. You start being kind without needing it reflected back to you. You give without keeping a ledger, without needing gratitude, without needing anyone to say, "You're such a good person," to feel like the good you did actually counted. And this is deeply unsettling to people who are used to transactional relationships. Because if you're not performing goodness for a reward, they cannot predict you anymore. They cannot flatter you into compliance. They cannot manipulate you with guilt, because guilt only works on people who are still trying to prove something. You are no longer trying to prove anything. And a person who isn't trying to prove anything is frankly one of the most dangerous, and I mean that in the best possible way, most dangerous people in any room. Dangerous to control, dangerous to manipulate, dangerous to underestimate. Now here's the part where I have to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort tonight. This transformation will cost you, people. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that healing is all light and expansion and everybody claps for the new you. Some people will not survive your growth, not because you pushed them away, but because the only version of you they ever wanted was the one who bled for their convenience. You will watch relationships that felt permanent quietly dissolve, not in a dramatic fight, but in a slow fade, because the thing holding them together was never actually love. It was your availability. It was your willingness to shrink. It was your bottomless capacity to absorb what other people refuse to carry themselves. And when that capacity disappears, because you finally, mercifully, took it back for yourself, some people will not know what to do with you anymore. They will say you got cold. They will say success changed you, or therapy changed you, or that new relationship changed you, or that you think you're better than everyone now. None of that is true. And you don't owe them the energy to correct it. What actually happened is far simpler and far more threatening to them than anything they'll say out loud. You stopped being an easy target. Let's talk about what that unsettles specifically, because I think it's important you understand the mechanics of it, not just the feeling of it. People who are used to a certain version of you have built an entire internal model of how to interact with you. They know which buttons produce which reactions. They know how much guilt it takes to get you to change your mind. They know how long they can go without checking on you before you check on them, out of habit, out of that old wiring that told you love means being the one who always reaches first. When you heal, you break that model. And human beings, all of us, not just the manipulative ones, even the well-meaning ones, do not like broken models. We like predictability. We like knowing that if we push here, we get that. A person who used to be predictable and suddenly isn't creates a kind of low-grade anxiety in everyone around them, because now nobody knows the rules anymore. This is why even good people, people who love you and aren't trying to control you, sometimes struggle with your healing. It's not malicious, it's just disorientation. The you they knew came with a manual. The you that's emerging does not. And here is the quiet, unglamorous truth about growth that nobody puts on a poster. Growing does not just change your future. It renegotiates every relationship in your present. Some relationships will renegotiate successfully. People who genuinely wanted you, not just your usefulness, will adjust, will learn the new rules, will love you in the new shape you've become, sometimes even more than they loved the old one. Because now what you give them is chosen, not extracted, and some relationships will not survive the renegotiation. Both outcomes are proof that the healing is real. I want to talk now about the specific quality that develops in a healed empath that people find the hardest to sit across from. It doesn't have a perfect name, but the closest word I can give you is stillness, not silence, stillness. A person who has done this work develops a kind of internal quiet that has nothing to do with how loud the world around them gets. You can throw chaos at them, provoke them, insult them, try every old trick that used to work, and they will look at you with something that isn't anger and isn't fear and isn't even indifference. It's presence, full, rooted, unblinking presence. And I need you to understand why that is so unsettling to people, especially people who are used to controlling others through emotional volatility. Volatility needs volatility to survive. A fire needs oxygen. If you throw a match at someone and they don't ignite, not because they're suppressing it, but because there's genuinely nothing there for the fire to catch, the person holding the match is left standing there, exposed, holding nothing but their own aggression with nowhere to put it. That is what your stillness does to people who used to be able to move you. They bring the storm, and you have become the ground it cannot shake. Now, I want to be very careful here, because I don't want you to hear any of this as permission to become hard or numb or to mistake detachment for growth. That's a trap too, and I've watched people fall into it. They get hurt enough times, they get burned enough times, and instead of healing, they armor up. They stop feeling altogether and call it strength. That is not what I'm describing tonight. The stillness I'm talking about is not the absence of feeling. It is feeling everything and choosing deliberately, moment by moment, not to be ruled by it. There is a version of healed that is actually just frozen, just shut down, just so afraid of being hurt again that it closes every door and calls the empty house peace. That is not what we're talking about. That's a different kind of wound, wearing the costume of wisdom. What I'm describing is harder than that, and better than that. It is staying open, staying soft enough to still cry at a stranger's kindness, still ache for the suffering in the world, still feel your chest tighten when someone you love is in pain, while also being anchored enough that none of that openness becomes an open door for people who want to walk through you and take what they please. Openness with boundaries, softness with a spine, that is the actual target, not a fortress, a garden with a gate. Let's talk about identity for a moment, because this is where the real unsettling happens, not just for the people around you, but inside you too. For most of your life, if you carried this wound, your identity was built around being needed, being the one who understood, being the one who could be trusted with the hard stuff, being the emotional translator in every room, the one who could sense what nobody else could sense and fix what nobody else could fix. That was your value. That was your place. That was, in some quiet, unspoken way, your entire sense of self. So, when healing starts, when you start setting boundaries, start saying no, start protecting your energy instead of spending it freely, you are not just changing your behavior, you are dismantling your identity. And that is terrifying, because for a while you genuinely will not know who you are without the old role. There will be a strange, disorienting period. Nobody talks about this enough, where you feel like an imposter in your own life, where the old you knew exactly how to behave in every situation, because the old you had a job: absorb, soothe, fix, understand, forgive. And the new you doesn't have that job description anymore and hasn't fully written a new one yet. That in between space is uncomfortable. It can feel like grief because it is grief. You are grieving a version of yourself that, for all its exhaustion, at least made sense to you, at least had a purpose you could name. But on the other side of that discomfort is something extraordinary. You start to realize that your worth was never actually tied to how much you could absorb for other people. It was always yours, unconditionally, underneath all of it. And once you know that in your bones you stop performing worth and you simply live from it, I want to give you a picture because I think it will land harder than the abstraction. Picture the old you in a room full of people, watching every face, adjusting your tone before you even speak, based on what you sense the room needs, laughing a little louder when someone seems insecure, going quiet when someone seems threatened by your energy, managing, always managing, so exhausted by the end of the night that you can barely speak in the car on the way home, and nobody in that room ever knew because you performed ease so well. Now picture the healed version of you in that same room. You still notice everything. That sensitivity never left. It was never the problem, remember. But you no longer feel responsible for fixing what you notice. You can sense someone's insecurity and simply let it be theirs. You can feel the tension in a room and choose not to absorb it as your job to resolve. You can walk out of that same room 2 hours later, and instead of collapsing from the effort of managing everyone else's emotional weather, you feel like yourself. Tired, maybe. Human, certainly. But not hollowed out. That is the entire transformation in one image. Same sensitivity, same awareness, same depth, completely different relationship to it. And I promise you, The people in that room will feel the difference even if they can't articulate it. They will sense that you are no longer available to be managed by their moods. And some of them, the ones who genuinely respect you, will find that magnetic, and some of them, the ones who relied on your old exhaustion, will find it deeply unsettling. Let both reactions happen. They are both correct from where each person stands. There's something else I need to say, because it's the part of this that people rarely have the courage to admit out loud. Sometimes the person most unsettled by your healing is you. There will be moments, I promise you this, because I have lived it and I have watched countless others live it, where you say no to something and immediately feel a wave of guilt so strong it makes your stomach hurt, where you protect your peace and some old voice inside. You whispers that you're being selfish, that you're becoming someone cold, that the old you was kinder. That voice is not the truth. That voice is just old programming, running on autopilot, mistaking your new freedom for a moral failure because freedom was never modeled to you as safe. You have to learn to sit with that discomfort without obeying it. You have to let the guilt be there without letting it drive. Because here is the thing nobody tells you. Growth does not feel like relief in the moment. It very often feels like loss. It feels like doing something wrong, even when you are, for the first time in your life, doing something right. The nervous system does not know the difference between this is dangerous and this is unfamiliar. It reacts to both the same way. So when your own body screams at you that setting a boundary feels like betrayal, I need you to understand. That scream is not wisdom. That scream is an old, outdated alarm system, still calibrated to a life you no longer live. You are allowed to override it, not by silencing your feelings, but by refusing to let a feeling that was built in a wound be the one steering a life that has already outgrown that wound. I want to talk now about power, because that's really what this whole transformation is about. Even though nobody likes to say the word out loud when they're talking about healing, we like to make healing sound gentle and soft and passive. But real healing is one of the most powerful things a human being can do to themselves, because it is the reclamation of something that was taken or given away piece by piece for years. An unhealed empath, however sensitive, however perceptive, is operating without their full power, because their power is constantly leaking out to other people. Every unset boundary is an open valve. Every unspoken need is currency handed to someone else. Every time you absorb what isn't yours to carry, you are quietly, invisibly, giving away a piece of your own life force to someone who didn't even have to ask for it. Healing closes those valves. And when you close them, when you stop leaking your energy into every relationship, every obligation, every person who has ever mistaken your empathy for an all-you-can-eat buffet, something happens that surprises even you. You become powerful. Not powerful in the way the world usually defines it. Not loud, not dominating, not aggressive. Powerful in the older, quieter sense of the word. Whole, self-contained, capable of standing in a room and not needing that room to validate you. And people can feel that. They can feel when someone has stopped bleeding for them. They can feel when a person's calm is no longer a resource they're entitled to. And depending on who they are, that will either draw them closer, because real power is magnetic, or it will repel them, because manipulation cannot survive contact with a person who has taken their power back. Either way, you will know exactly who was ever really on your side. Healing is a filter. It doesn't just change you, it reveals everyone around you. Let me tell you what this looks like on an ordinary day, because I don't want to leave you with only the philosophy. I want you to be able to recognize it when it happens to you, or when it's already happening and you haven't had the words for it yet. It looks like reading a message that would have once sent you spiraling for hours and feeling the old pull, and then almost calmly setting the phone down and going back to what you were doing. It looks like sitting across from someone you love while they're upset with you, feeling the old instinct to collapse and apologize just to make the discomfort stop, and instead staying in your body, staying present, saying, I hear you, and I still believe I did the right thing. And meaning it, it looks like noticing you're the only one reaching out in a friendship, and instead of doubling your effort to compensate, simply letting the silence answer the question for you. It looks like grief sometimes for the relationships that don't make it through this change. It looks like joy, unexpectedly, in ordinary moments, a walk, a meal, a quiet morning that used to be swallowed whole by anxiety about everyone else's feelings. It looks like being called different by people who knew the old you, and feeling for the first time that being different from who you were is the whole point. I want to close with something that I think is the real heart of all of this, the thing underneath the thing. You were never actually too sensitive. You were never actually too much. What happened to you is that you were sensitive in a world, in relationships, maybe in a family, that did not know how to hold that sensitivity with care, so it treated it like a resource to extract instead of a gift to protect. And you adapted the way any intelligent, feeling creature adapts to its environment. You became the giver, the absorber, the fixer, the translator of everyone else's unspoken pain, because that adaptation at some point kept you safe, or kept you loved, or kept you needed, which as a child, or even as a younger adult, can feel indistinguishable from safety itself. But you are not required to keep living inside an adaptation that was only ever meant to get you through a season, not through an entire life. Healing is not becoming someone new. Healing is becoming who you were before the world taught you to survive by disappearing into other people. And when you returned to that, when you finally come home to the version of yourself that feels deeply and gives freely and still keeps something whole and untouchable at the center that no one else gets to spend, you will unsettle people. Let them be unsettled. You are not responsible for making your healing comfortable for anyone who benefited from your unhealed self. You are not selfish for outgrowing what nearly emptied you. You are not cold for finally learning to keep some of your own warmth for yourself. You are simply, quietly, undeniably whole, and a whole person walking calmly through a world full of people still waiting to be filled by someone else will always look a little strange, a little unreachable, a little unsettling. Let it be strange, let it be unsettling, let it be, at long last, entirely yours.